Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
Welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. So many issues face law enforcement these days, including the border, other issues of national security, protests in the streets, and crime, including the epidemic of domestic violence. And joining us now to discuss all of this and much more is Canyon County Sheriff Kieran Donahue, who is the new president of the National Sheriff's Association. By the way, he is the first Idaho sheriff to hold the position of president of the NSA, National Sheriff's Association. Sheriff Donahue, really great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Rita. It's my honor to be on your show today.
What are the biggest issues facing law enforcement today, as you guys are really right there on the front lines?
It really is the matter of border security because there's so many cascading effects from that. And what I mean by that is that it's not just our southern border, but our northern borders and our coastal waters. We are inundated with criminality, as of course everyone knows, from those borders. But with those open borders, we've had so much influx of fentanyl that fentanyl is really beating us down throughout the nation. And when I talk to sheriffs, no matter where I go, I ask them, what's the biggest issues? Fentanyl, of course, is the big one, that and methamphetamine still. And then they say we are overwhelmed by the illegal immigration aspect, the criminality that comes with it, the violence associated with the drug trade. And those things just cannot be overstated. It's just, we are facing unprecedented times with the criminality, and realize that we're just trying to come back. These same sheriffs across our nation are trying to come back from the defund the police and all of that nonsense and these social experiments that haven't worked in any of the large cities. So recruitment is still down. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see that trend continue, and where sheriffs are on the front line of literally every jurisdiction in this nation, we are doing it with less and less resources.
You know, you talked about recruitment. How tough is it to keep recruitment or even get it, as you brought up, and it's down? It seems like that's everywhere. The morale, talk about that too as well.
Yes, ma'am. That's what's difficult. You know this. You've done so much and covered law enforcement for so long that we ask these men and women to lay their lives down, literally lay their lives down for their fellow citizens. And we do it day and night, and almost daily, but certainly weekly, we lose someone. And then we pay them not that great of wages, because a lot of the Sheriff's Association members across this great nation are not in high tax districts. They don't have that tax structure. So to pool that kind of money to put into employment into these officers is very difficult for the taxpayers and for those commissioners or those boards. So then you couple that with, well, we're also going to make it really difficult inflation-wise for you to find a place to live, to raise your family, and try to realize the dreams that you've set out. And again, at the same time, put this badge on and this gun and go out there and risk your life. And so the morale is like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Now, a clarifying point, I believe, and I've always believed, they do it because God calls them to this service. He called me to this service. And so they do it because they love what they do. But the morale takes a hit. The recruitment takes a hit. And we're seeing less and less people want to join this profession. And that should alarm the people of the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. You also brought up the defund the police. I think about just how tough that has been. How much is that the sort of disrespect that seems to be out there, unfortunately, because, boy, I feel like our men and women, the Sheriff's Association, which you represent so well, they deserve all of our respect and more. How frustrating is that?
It's a dagger in the back of every man and woman that works in this industry, and I would even say to the non-commissioned officers who we have to have an army at every one of our offices to make it work. Those that carry a badge and a gun, and those that are civilian in nature. But they're families. They are a family. They're a brotherhood, and that attack on us and our profession has been devastating, and it's not done yet, and it continues to reverberate again downstream, and it's people that have never walked in our shoes, and what they don't realize, Rita, is that these men and women are just like us. They have families. They're coaches. They have children in school. They want to make ends meet, and yet when they heard this rhetoric and parts of society turning their back on them, and it was devastating. It has been devastating. We're still seeing this effect. Even here in Idaho, we're recruiting law enforcement commissioned officers from almost every state in the union, especially from Midwest, all the way to the western coastline, because they've had enough of it. If you look at the California officers, Washington State, Oregon, they've said, we've had enough. We're coming to where somebody appreciates what we do. And while we're glad to get them, it's devastating for those agencies. And I will clarify, too, and you know this, we are the first to try to root out bad cops. We despise bad cops. We do everything we can to scrutinize the hiring process, to put that benchmark where that doesn't happen. But sometimes it slips through, and people make egregious errors in judgment. Then we're also the first in line to say, we need to investigate, we need to make an arrest if possible, and we need to get a conviction, and they need to be held accountable for what they've done. And yet that's all lost on the mainstream, and people say, well, all cops are bad. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not true.
You brought up mainstream. How much also does the media unfairly sometimes play a role?
Well, I think it's almost, when we look at today's media, it's nearly probably 90%. And it's just so unfortunate when you have mainstream media jumping on these bandwagons, this liberal idea that we can all just get along fine doing whatever we want, and no one has to be held accountable in society, and you can commit whatever crimes you want. How have we gotten to here? And I know that you've probably heard the experts from my inauguration speech down in Oklahoma City when I took over as the president. And I've said then, and I say it today, and I speak all over the country, I do not believe we have seen such troubled times since the beginning of World War II. That's what it feels like to me out there. There's so many threats against our citizens, so many enemies. When you look at China, Hezbollah, ISIS, all of these, and through Mexico, of course, the borders, pulling these bad actors into our country, allowing them to come in. We are in a very fragile situation as a country, not just as a state by state, but as a country. And it's because mainstream media, in a large part, continues to fan those flames, not thinking that they're going to be oppressed as well if things go completely haywire.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
How overwhelmed are the folks that are helping at the border? And also, just as you brought up, every town is now sadly a border town across this country. Every state, including Idaho, is a border state because of that wide open border and the risk. How much of a risk, as you brought up, does it really pose on so many levels?
Well, you're right. Initially, it poses the initial risk is to our law enforcement, both state, local, and federal on those borders. And when you look at the northern border, we've seen an 800% increase in activity last fiscal year to this fiscal year, 800% increase of illegal activity on those borders. Those men and women are fighting like crazy. Our partners with Customs and Border Protection, they're the ones that are really trying to hold back the line. But then it's the citizens that live on wherever you look at, whether southern border, northern border, coastal regions. These people are the first ones in to meet the illegal activity. And I'm not talking about the illegal alien that's trying to get here to find a job to feed his family. I'm not talking about that person. I'm talking about the known suspected terrorists. I'm talking about the cartels from Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation Mexican cartel operators. So then the citizens, and I've interviewed citizens who've lost family members to murder on that southern border. And then it gets into our communities. And as you say, we're all border states, we're all border communities. DEA just came out not too long ago that every state it has cartel membership and operators in it. That's DEA telling us. They're not making that up. And so every time in my streets, you can name the state, name the county, and you've got criminal activity. We have full-fledged integrated cartel operations going day and night, and our investigations are addressing those. When you look at the high-intensity drug trafficking areas, there's, 33 in the Continental and Puerto Rico. That's because there's so much drug activity in our country. And so every one of those citizens that we represent as sheriffs are feeling the effect of those borders because of the overwhelming supply of fentanyl and methamphetamine, and it's literally killing our citizens on that average 100,000 a year now. You know, those people have families. Those people are parts of the community, and they're not just drug users from, your normal drug user on the street. These are high school kids. They're babies. They're grade school kids. They're lawyers. They're doctors. You name the demographic, that criminality is affecting those communities.
You talked, Sheriff, also about like the Mexican drug cartels, the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartel. These guys are also ruthless and well armed too, right? I mean, which is also another frightening aspect. I
tell you, another thing that I've done for years and years is I travel to the border and I study and I work with my sheriffs and I work with others and I travel the country and I give presentations. 2 to 3 hour presentations. I was just with the North Carolina sheriffs just a few weeks ago, and I gave them a 2-hour lecture on the cartels. And it's my presentations are a little bit graphic, but it points to the fact that these people do not care about you. They do not care about the people you represent. They care about the money, and they are obligated to get that money back down to the cartel bosses in Mexico. And so the ruthlessness, the arming of these guys, we're going up against full automatic weapons, 50 caliber weapons. Idaho, I was just in a meeting with the Attorney General Garland last week in Boise, Idaho. And I learned from the ATF that Idaho itself is now a source state for weapons going to Mexico. They are so well armed and they're so vicious with controlling of their territories. The murder rate is unprecedented. And, of course, people have this false thought that it's going to stay on the Mexican side. I have news for them. It's been on the American side for years. And so the ruthlessness of the cartels is just, again, unprecedented. We have never seen anything like it. And when the tortures and the beheadings and the trafficking of human beings and sex trafficking of girls and boys, this country just has to take the blinders off. These people hate you. They want your money. They want violence. It feeds them, and they're puppets for the country of China, who's directing this and providing them with the precursors of fentanyl and methamphetamine, and have been for years. So this is a giant monster. I told Attorney General Garland in that meeting last week, I said, sir, we are at war. We are at war with the cartels. He did not disagree with me. He did not, because he's been to Mexico. He sees the war within Mexico by the cartels against the government, at times the military and the federales. This is real, and it's right there at our fingertips.
Were you surprised to hear that Idaho has sort of become one of the places, like you mentioned, with part of the drug trade, and explain sort of your reaction and the role that Idaho, I guess, among so many other states, sadly, in this country?
Well, I wasn't surprised, Rita, because I've been in this battle for over 20 years, right? And so when I was a lot younger than I am today, my sheriff tasked me out to the FBI for 6 years as an undercover, working guns and drugs and violence. And it was the cartels then, and it's the cartels now. And the drug game hasn't changed except for a couple of points. It's gotten far more of supply. The drugs have gotten far cheaper, and the drugs have gotten far more deadly. But we're dealing with the same damn bad actors. Now, Jalisco New Generation is a little bit new to our scene, but not Sinaloa. The Sinaloa cartel, we've been battling these guys for a long time. And so the other thing that's changed from my perspective in Idaho is that while we were doing, sometimes singular cases on multi-defendant, highly complex investigations, now we have multiple highly complex, multi-defendant cases going at the same time, 5 or 6 at a time, just in jurisdictions, and it's all tied to the Mexican cartels, every bit of it. They supply 90% of all drugs to the United States, 90% in the illegal drug trade. That's hundreds of billions of dollar industry annually? You think they're going to give up that tax? They're not going to give it up. And now with this allegiance they've made with China, it's so dangerous to the United States.
Yeah, that's really alarming. The other thing, too, Sheriff, also is these gangs. We're seeing, obviously, we've seen, MS-13, but we're also seeing a lot more of Venezuelan gangs, Tren de Aragua, for example. How much are they having an impact, wreaking havoc in America, including your area?
Well, it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up because we're getting bulletins on that all the time now. Tren de Agua is a very serious Venezuelan gang. It's the bulletins are coming out. Right, my neighboring state of Utah, violence occurring, stabbings, murder, shootings. They've been traveling through the state of Idaho. We've got reports of that. Illinois is inundated with Tren de Agua. They're pushing out local street gangs. They've made a very strong allegiance with the cartels, which is probably the worst thing that could have happened for all of us. And again, they're very vicious, very inhumane in their actions. They want violence. They live off of that violence, fear, and extortion. And so to have them coupled with the cartels, these are very dangerous times in America. This Venezuelan gang this is no joke. They're probably 5,000 to 6,000 members strong at least that we know of here in the United States. The vast majority have come across those borders undetected or encountered and apprehended and let go for some imaginary court date 6 or 7 years from now that they're allegedly going to show up to, which is a joke. And so they're here. They've established those cells. They've established those networks. Now they're interfaced with the Mexican cartels and the local gangs. If they don't come under their compliance, they're going to push them out. This is New York State is another state that's really seeing a lot of this. This is incredibly dangerous, and it's incredibly alarming that that this thing took so long to get on our radar, but it's here now.
Yeah, and it seems like they are everywhere, and obviously working also with the cartels. It's sort of that combination. You mentioned you were undercover. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you became to be the president, because you obviously, as you mentioned, 2 decades in law enforcement, well deserved.
Well, thank you, Rita. I have a storied background. I'm a cowboy kid. Grew up on a ranch in central Idaho, and I traveled a bit. Got into law enforcement later on. I had 2 brothers that were long-term law enforcement guys for sheriff's offices, and it wasn't long that I was with Canyon County, that where my home was and my family. The sheriff came to me and said, "We want you on a task force we're forming to address the criminality in the gangs." We had a very small population in that day, probably 100,000 people. We had 200 shootings a year.
Wow.
Related. 200 shootings, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And very dangerous. And so our goal was to infiltrate the hierarchy of the gangs and take them out. So me and my team, federal, state, local guys, were all handpicked, and we were put in this task force as a very covert unit. Obviously top secret clearance to the FBI, and we worked under the U.S. Marshal Services, or U.S. Marshal as well as the authority, and that's what we did. We went out and we took them down. Sometimes it take us a year and a half. Sometimes it take us 2 years through our investigations, but we would indict entire gangs, not just the gang members, but the entire membership for any number of crimes, up to including murder. And so that 6 to 7 years of being there was really, I loved it. It was one of the most exciting times you can imagine. I'm an adrenaline guy, just like some of the rest of my colleagues. But we had a lot of autonomy, and we did a lot of great work, and we brought those numbers down to 1 or 2 shootings a year. That's a trend. It's going to spike. It's going to go down here and there. But it really changed the face of the community. And now that community's really grown, those communities, I should say, I have 6 cities in my jurisdiction, and they've really flourished because we addressed those particular issues. And from there, the sheriff, when he wanted to retire, he came to me and asked me to run for office. I laughed at him. I said, "You're out of your mind. I'm not the guy." And 7 months later, I remember riding up to him at a parade on horseback and said, "Well, God says we're going to do it, so let's do it." And so I ran for office, and I've been the sheriff now for the last 12 years, and I just won my election to run for another 4 years for my 4th term. And about 10 years ago, I got involved with NSA and with the domestic violence committee. I was appointed to the committee and started attending more and more committees. And then ultimately, about 5 years ago, I was elected to the board of directors, and then, of course, elected to the executive committee. And now I'm the president.
Bravo. By the way, before I let you go, you also brought up, the epidemic of domestic violence. How pervasive and how big of an issue is that? And also, I also think about how tough it is for law enforcement. I have so many friends in law enforcement. Now I have a new friend in you. And I look at also just how tough it is, because often domestic violence, those are some of the toughest calls for law enforcement because they're so unpredictable. So from both ends, obviously the epidemic is so horrible, but also trying, when you answer those calls, it's often one of the most difficult for law enforcement to respond to, because there is such emotion, as you know all too well. Just talk about how important that is. I think we need to talk about that a lot too.
Well, if there's one issue out there that's probably the most prevalent issue in law enforcement, outside of what we've discussed, it is domestic violence. CDC, Center for Disease Control, tracks our numbers when we write citations and cases and do our reporting. Those numbers, it's up to 50% today, up to 50% of all law enforcement calls of service are domestic violence calls. Just think of that number alone. Same CDC numbers, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men are or will be victims of domestic violence in their lifetime. That is staggering statistics. And it is the most dangerous call we go on. And it's not just the call itself that affects officers. If you survive the call, because a lot of officers don't survive those calls. They're ambushed on the approach. They're killed inside the houses or apartments. So many ways those things go wrong. And unfortunately, the victims are often killed or injured. And this can be man or woman. It's more on the heavy on the male side than it is the female, but there's both. And then almost always there's kids involved. There's families. There's almost always. And what's the reasons for domestic violence? Well, of course, it's the physical control and the nature of power and control, but it's economics, it's manipulation, it's psychological. And I can tell you, when I was undercover, I saw so much of it that it affected me so deeply. I came home one night and I told my wife, Jeannie, I said, all I see is domestic violence. It doesn't matter what house I go into, what search warrant I'm on. I got to do something. And I tell this freely. God directs what he wants us to do. And I said, God wants, I need to start a foundation. And I was running for sheriff, and she goes, what do you want to do? I said, I want to start a public awareness campaign on the issue of domestic violence. And I said, I want to call it the K. Donahue Foundation, and it'll live in perpetuality after we're gone. And so she came on board. She's my co-founder, Jeannie, and we started the Man Up Crusade, making awareness now using purple. But it was a call to service, Man Up Crusade, call to arms. We can talk about this issue. So we just surpassed our 12th year, partnering with professional rodeos, with PBR, with state fairs, with music festivals, with whoever will put purple into their programs, and like pink is for cancer, to bring solidarity about the issue of domestic violence. And so we now are in 17 states, 30-something events a year, and my wife Jeannie and I are the heads of it, and we have a board of directors and volunteers, and all the money we raise in those communities, no matter what state it's in, we give 100% plus back to that community, and we go on to the next place. And we do that because what we tell people is domestic violence is a learned behavior. If we can get to these kids and we can stop the teen dating violence and the sexual abuse and just domestic violence in general, if we can change the next generation of children, Rita, we can win this thing. But we got to get to the children. We got to get to the parents to get to the children. So domestic violence kills a lot of officers. Unfortunately, it kills far more victims. But 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men, that's your national statistics. And every 9 seconds, a woman is beaten in this country by her domestic partner. This is why I'm so passionate about stopping domestic violence. And I've brought NSA. We have a resolution passed this year. NSA, at any one of our conferences, we will have a purple day to represent sheriffs in purple, saying we stand in solidarity against the issue of domestic violence in this country.
Bravo. Bravo, bravo. Well, you are obviously making an enormous difference through your foundation, you and your wonderful wife. And also, I love what you guys are doing there at the National Sheriff's Association. Everybody be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. So many important topics. And Sheriff Donahue, first of all, congrats on becoming the new president there at the National Sheriff's Association. We're with you. We support you. And bravo to all the great work all the great men and women do there, and also what you're doing here with domestic violence and so many other issues to combat it. We just applaud you and keep you guys in our thoughts and prayers always. It's really great to have you here.
Well, thank you for that. And you know what? We couldn't do what we do without people like yourself bringing the masses and saying, look, we've got to be here. We've got to unify. We've got to be together. So thank you. God bless you for you and your show that you put on. You do so many things.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.